All right, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Valentine's Day edition workshop. It's 5:30 p.m. Just for the recording, my name is Mayor Breeden. All the other counselors are here except for Counselor Ross, and he will not be here tonight. He will not be here on Zoom. He will not be here in person. He will be absent. And the first item on the agenda is the evaluation of short-term rental code amendments with Matt Martin. Before you get started, I am going to recuse myself. I have a short-term rental license and will not be a part of this discussion. I'm going to remove myself from the proceeding, but I'll be here in the room watching on with interest.
So that means we have to get along.
Here you go. The gavel has been passed.
All the ladies.
Now that she got her mouth full.
I'm gonna go over there and eat.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, counselors and those attending online. I'm Matthew Martin with Sisters Community Development Department. Back with continued conversation regarding evaluation of the city's short-term rental program. My intent is to keep my remarks brief and just give you a overview as a supplement to the staff report that was provided in the meeting packet and yield the bulk of the time for questions and discussion by the council. I want to acknowledge that I'm joined here by Scott Woodford, Sisters Community Development Director, and on Zoom, Garrett Crossteck, City Legal Counsel. So use us as resources with questions either throughout or at the end. So my intent on my presentation today is give you some background for the council's benefit, as well as those that may be attending online or reviewing this later. Background of where we've been with this process, and then provide some additional legal analysis regarding some contemplated changes relative or actions relative to the short-term rental program, and then talk about next steps and look to the council for some direction on what in what way to begin to initiate any formal amendments to the development code or municipal code for short-term rentals. Again, noting that what brought us here on this discussion is council goal to evaluate the short-term rental program to mitigate the adverse impacts on the community, and really thinking about availability of long-term housing, as well as nuisances created by potentially created by short-term rentals in the community. We've met over several workshops in the fall of last year, where we gave provided an introductory overview of the current regulatory framework of our program, with what the standards are in the process to be approved and then licensed for a short-term rental, and what those impacts are. In particular, what are the numbers? How many short-term rentals in the community? What are the revenue sources associated with the permitting, as well as transient room taxes? Just kind of that general overview. And then again, initiating kind of where's the initial position by the council and planning commission, and kind of begin to initiate the conversation. Based on those conversations, there was requests for additional information and details associated with the current program, and then evaluating some potential changes. That included data from the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office relative to calls associated with short-term rental properties. And also completed a survey from owners and operators with some great feedback that was presented at our last meeting. And then analysis of the concept of increasing the concentration limit from the current 250-foot buffer to 500 feet. From those conversations, we're beginning to refine or develop some ideas as to what changes continue to be contemplated. And what staff captured as the considerations for the council from our previous conversations, just quickly reading through these, are expanding that concentration limit from 250 feet to 500 feet, applying the concentration limit to condominiums, whereas now they are exempt from applying that. It was considered to apply the concentration limit to the commercial districts, initially kind of as a concept. Both the council and the planning commission, as far as staff understands, is kind of backed away from implementing or applying the concentration limit to those areas. prohibiting short-term rentals in the expanded urban growth boundary and annexation areas, those new areas within the community. Limiting transferability of prior existing short-term rentals. Those are those that were lawfully established prior to the kind of wholesale change to the program in 2018. Concept of increasing the minimum required number of days to be rented currently is 1 day out of 365 days. And then the concept, not as a code amendment, but putting a pause on issuance of or review of any applications for new short-term rentals while these changes are being contemplated. I use the term pause, formal term in some instances, moratorium. So the Planning Commission was in general agreement with those concepts. They did abstain from evaluating the moratorium, recognizing that that's an action and a policy to be contemplated by the council alone. Within the Planning Commission, the previous work session, they identified some other ideas to bring back to the council, so I wanted to note those. Is establishing some special provisions or unique provisions for what I've characterized as hosted short-term rentals. That'd be those that are either the rental of the owner's primary property, where that's their primary residence, and or rental at a time period when the owner is present on the property. And recognizing that perhaps one of those special considerations, if we were to pursue this, would be to not apply any increase in concentration limit to these type of rental scenarios. And then a concept that was unique, but I want to acknowledge is that providing the temporary allowance for short-term rentals during kind of those high peak or those citywide event time periods, not citywide events, but those that are in the region, those being the folk festival, the quilt show, or perhaps the rodeo, and maybe there are others. So that brings us to kind of the legal analysis that we wanted to provide some additional data to you today. First, starting with the transfer limits, acknowledging that those short-term rentals that were established prior to 2018 are identified as prior existing short-term rentals, approved or lawfully established under the previous framework. Those are allowed to be transferred to new property owners, whereas no land use approval is required, but instead simply move towards obtaining the short-term rental operators and a business license. In contrast, those approved after 2018, when the most recent code provisions were adopted, within those new standards, it specifically stated that these short-term rental approvals are not transferable to new owners, but rather that new owners would be subject to applying for an approval of a new short-term rental land use approval and subject to all applicable standards at the time. In addition, of course, they would need to receive appropriate operator and business licenses. Now, we've acknowledged that there may be some legal implications with limiting the transfer of these prior existing uses or short-term rentals. And just in brief, I kind of put those into kind of what staff's identified as three primary categories: is impacts on current property owners, the concept of takings of a vested property right. When you establish a use that was lawfully established, that there's a base of an assumption and a property value that you can carry that forward and then transfer or sell that property right to subsequent owners. Also acknowledging concerns over equal treatment of similar situated properties and uses. This is an idea that other properties in a neighborhood may be eligible for establishing a short-term rental, but limiting the transferability would remove that opportunity from these properties. And just want to acknowledge that in consulting with legal counsel, the other strategies have been considered in different jurisdictions with varying effect. And however, case law is not particularly conclusive to provide clear direction that these strategies are legally defensible. So I'll pause there with my my speedy introduction to that and pass it to Garrett if you have any comments on this topic.
Sure. Hi, council. I'm not trying to hide from you that just the video on the Zoom is disabled. But I think Matt teed it up pretty well. I did want to just sort of clarify one of the points on sort of the equal treatment. Particularly if you guys end up, expanding the boundaries of the buffers. You could certainly end up in a scenario where the non-conforming STRs end up at a disadvantage if they were to be limited on transferability, because while someone else might be able to they might be able to transfer now, maybe they're not be able to transfer in the future because now they're within a 500-foot buffer, and so they kind of were in a better position than those after 2018 STRs, but because of the intersection of those two policies are now in a kind of worse position than the STRs, and that can get into some fairly tricky equal treatment issues. And then yeah, Matt's correct that the particular way that this is being considered to be implemented hasn't specifically been tested. There's been some more generalized policies sort of, clearing the board, so to speak, of STRs that has been tested in various jurisdictions, including Oregon. And those have had, mostly favorable results for the jurisdiction, although it has been a while since that's been reviewed, and some of the national, I would say, case law on takings has moved a little bit more to the property rights protection side of things. So would it still hold up? Fair question. And then, of course, there's amongst the states, some states have come to different conclusions on that very issue. But implementing that particular phase out of non-conforming uses when it's not in an across the board sort of manner is what we're referring to as untested.
When you say across the board, I mean, does zoning play into that? When across the board, you mean citywide, or would that change per zoning?
Well, mostly correct. So, there's been, for instance, some fairly recent litigation down in California where a city basically just said STRs are not permitted in residential zones, and all of you existing short-term rentals, you basically have 3 to 5 years to phase out, and we're done. They weren't implementing kind of we're only targeting non-conforming STRs. You guys are the ones that have to be phased out, but all of you, what I would call conforming STRs, you're allowed to stay.
So on the equal, this is Susan, on the equal treatment, Counselor Cobb, sorry. So we have currently a conforming and a non-conforming, depending upon what side of the year 2018 you are.
Mhm.
So I'm not understanding the equal treatment being a problem, since they're already being treated unequally.
Well, right, because they are kind of in a first in time position. They do have superior rights. And then I guess what I'm saying is that there's at least an argument that because of whatever policy package might be adopted, they're not being put in the same position as the conforming ones. They're actually falling behind them because of, they couldn't renew or transfer now because of larger buffers, say.
Okay.
So
So I-
they're essentially being phased out, even though conforming ones wouldn't be.
Okay, so the question of equal treatment, when I'm a non-conforming, you're saying that it would be unfair, it would be unequal treatment to all the non-conforming if some of them, I mean, I think I'm missing, I'm sorry I'm so dense here, but
No,
Okay.
not a problem. It's deep in the weeds and nuanced, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily a violation of the law. I'm saying this is an argument that has been raised.
Ah.
And so I'm just letting council be mindful of it, and frankly, if this is an avenue council wants to go any further on, it's probably ripe for a legal memo and some executive session types discussions to get into those weeds, but at the overview level, I'm just pointing it out.
So is this point basically around the issue of going from 250 feet to 500 feet?
That's an example of it, how, implementing a package of policies might have that kind of outcome, or, be more susceptible to that type of argument.
Is that the only issue that we're considering that would fall into that argument?
yeah, we're talking
It-
about the transfer of, the transfer of the STR rights.
I'm not
Right, but it largely comes
seeing it.
into play in conjunction with other policies you might be
Okay, so
considering, and so
several of
that's the most
not just-
clear example I could provide.
okay.
So on the litigation where the town is not permitting any more STRs in the residential zone and they want them phased out in 5 years. That one's in progress right now. I mean, we don't know how that went, correct?
That one is largely done as far as I'm aware. Again, it's in California. A lot of the same concepts, but it's not going to be directly binding here.
Right, but what my question is, how did it go? Did the city succeed or did the homeowners?
The city prevailed on most of the issues, including the permissibility of the phase out.
Oh, that's good. Why
Eh,
don't we do?
Well, and I mean, yeah, the caveat is there was certainly some better ways that the property owners could have made their arguments, had the decision been different, if they had done that. Couldn't tell you, but the court certainly put some fault on them for some of their arguments or lack of evidence.
Garrett, is it fair to say though, if the council was looking at expanding the buffer to 500 feet, that buffer would apply to short-term rentals, keeping the rest of the code intact, right? So we'd have the non-conforming, which would still be able to transfer their licenses. So anything before 2018, which I think are like 77. So over half are still in that category. But are you saying that we would have probably some potential liability if the 500 feet then is applied to that same class that exists today as a short-term rental?
No, if the 500-foot buffer was a standalone policy and you didn't do any limitations on non-conforming transfers, that's probably, then you not really having the issues that we're talking about now. It's really the interplay between those two.
Okay.
So I remember in the discussions before, the only way my simple brain could somewhat package it was to kind of say that we could make things more difficult for future, but had to accept for the most part what was already existing, because that would be a taking. I could kind of, I could kind of get that into my brain, because every single situation appears to kind of have its own nuance to it, which is why the 2018 date is in there. It's, well, we can't really go backwards to people who already have short-term rentals and change the rules for them, because they got the permission when the rules were X. So now the rules are Y, so that only applies to those moving forward, unless we wanted to go into some huge legal maneuver.
It might not. I mean, this is Garrett is our CYA guy and, worst case scenario guy, which is great.
Right.
But I don't want to be intimidated into not trying to do something that we feel is the best option because we might get litigated.
So I think, why would we take a little time to say, of the 5 or the 7 options, do we want to talk about the moratorium first before we look at the other issues, since Garrett might want to?
That's fine with me. That's fine with me.
So
Look at moratorium.
quick overview of the pause. Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
And then we can conclude with the discussion. So acknowledging there's a tool, pause or moratorium that is available for consideration. Oregon Revised Statute does provide some process and requirements for considering and adopting such a moratorium. It can be a time-consuming and lengthy process, recognizing that there's minimum notice requirements and findings that you need to identify that the current regulations are inadequate. The needed supply of effective housing is not unreasonably restricted. There are not any reasonable alternatives available, except for said moratorium. That there's a public harm caused by not imposing a moratorium, and that there's sufficient resources to complete the process of update in the limited 120-day time period.
And that "and" is really important. It has to be all 4 of those, right?
Correct. Yeah, all findings need to be met.
Right.
And recognize that that there are opportunities for extension, but you need to justify that and go through a separate public hearing process. So that's my brief overview, and to complement the staff report. Of course, Garrett's here available for any questions.
The consideration about, going through a formal moratorium process is that you are looking at, so it's a minimum 45-day notice, right? And in advance of that, you're drafting findings that have to be legally drafted, reviewed, assembled. You're holding a public hearing. So you're looking at a couple months at a minimum. And, the question is, how effective is that for, getting the outcome that you want, rather than, pushing ahead with some of these strategies that we're working on, and moving ahead with a code change that we have to hold a public hearing, bring you an ordinance, and can probably do faster than that if we are able to get things on the docket and kind of settle in on some of these strategies. So there, got to think through that. Plus, by doing the notice, you're putting it out there, not just a DLCD, but you're providing that public notice, and you run the risk of having a rush of applications coming in, especially if you're tipping your hat to some of the regulations that may be changing. So you got to keep that in mind too.
So
On the notification, we would do the notification before doing the research on the findings, or we would do the research on the findings first and then do the
You have to
notification?
drop the finding. Yeah, I think.
Okay, so if we drafted the findings, I mean, just reading the 4 criteria, I wasn't really comfortable that we would meet all 4. I mean, I don't obviously have any data to support it, but one of them at least looked really difficult to achieve. So, I mean, if we update the STR code with some of, like the 250 to 500 and some of these other points, in the meantime, do a research on findings, couldn't we kind of do a tandem thing? And then if the findings say, you really can't do this, then that's,
Yeah, I mean, I think, so, okay, pulling back to the 10,000 foot level. I think, what Matt presented a couple weeks ago, and some of these other changes, especially the 500 foot, you're in effect getting really close to achieving the same thing as almost achieving the same thing as a moratorium. You're dramatically limiting the future
That's true.
potential for new licenses. And so if the council's objective is, we feel like we have the right mix of lodging available in our community, and that includes the, 100 and, the 5% of our residential properties that are STRs, then by, simply doing the 500 foot, you're almost getting there to keeping that equilibrium. Which, in some ways you're making this code change, and that's almost like a moratorium in itself, because there's not going to be, a lot of parcels left to get a short-term license.
what do you think? Go ahead.
And just to be devil's advocate here, some of these issues of, public harm, I mean, wouldn't you say people living in the forest is public harm? And this is not the only thing that's contributing to that by any means, but it is one of the things. And, I'm a firm believer we need to chip away at all of the issues.
Yeah, I think-
And the governor, and I mean, I know it's not like I don't know, there's always these words thrown around of like a state of emergency in housing, right? Like, I don't think it's ever been officially blessed, but again, there's like emergency, so again, devil's advocate here, but
well, I don't think necessarily being a devil's advocate, I think Garrett would probably agree that we would craft those findings and tailor those findings to be about our housing situation. That is the purpose for why we are, a big part of the purpose. There's other livability concerns and things like that we're looking into this, but is that we have a housing shortage demonstrated through our housing plan and everything like that. And we think by putting a moratorium in effect, we're preserving more housing for long-term housing, right? I mean, we would have to demonstrate that and draft these findings, and then the risk, Garrett, you could probably get it, but it would have to, the risk is someone who is interested in getting a short-term rental, if someone thinks that they do have harm by the city putting the moratorium in effect, then it would appeal that to,
Mhm.
to
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
sorry.
yeah, I'm under,
Too many acronyms.
I mean, I'm for the most part getting that this isn't probably a great avenue to go down, but just one more clarification is that I know this is kind of falling under a land use issue, which I know to a certain degree it is, but it's not also just a business license. I mean, where's the line between land use and business?
Well, the license process goes to the municipal code, right? But we also have it in our development code because it is a use within one of our zones, right?
Yep.
So it's both. The new license, a new short-term rentals are required to get a land use application and apply for
Mhm.
a licensed operator. Right?
You got it. Yeah, so
Yeah.
what we've largely been discussing is changes to the development code and then the complementary operating license is kind of those details and kind of how, what you do on a kind of a day-to-day operation, not the eligibility to first and initially establish short-term rental.
And it doesn't mean just, and if we try to manage it just straight out of our municipal code or something like that, or say, we're no longer going to grant licenses, but you can still go through land, it still exposes just because it lies one one place in our code versus the other, it could still be appealed. And
If we were to go forward with changes in the code and at the same time look into that, is that too much of an employee burden relative to everything else we're doing? Would we outsource that? Would it be, I mean, just to have an idea of if it were to be, if we were to do this findings research.
I mean, city attorney would be most of the work on drafting the findings, right? And then work with staff on the notice to deal. And of course, we would do the work on scheduling the public hearings and things like that. But yeah, it'd be a fair amount of time and cost to put together the findings that would be defensible.
But would it be a burden relative to that time? And I mean, is that a block, and is what I'm trying to find out? Would that be a reason that we'd have to delay doing this? I mean, can we manage it?
45 days is, I mean, that's just the minimum. I think we were looking at least a couple months to kind of go through that process.
All right, thank you. I'm so sorry. Yes.
Okay, so I think we kind of understand to some degree where the problems are. I am, I'm very impressed with the information that we have received through the survey. Thinking back to why we were concerned about the short-term rentals and looking at what Bend had been going through, we wanted to make sure, you know, we didn't end up with the same problems. I think that from what I can gather from the reports and the surveys, we have accomplished what we intended to do. We have lowered the percentage of short-term rentals in our community. We have very little activity at those rentals that require police intervention that are related to the short-term rental and not the property owner. I'm still very interested in making sure that there doesn't end up being clumping so that some neighborhoods have more than others and it's not distributed well. That seems to be pretty much controlled the way it is. So if we are going to do something tonight, then I would let you know that I am in favor of number 2. Number 3 would consider and would like to discuss number 4. And I would be willing to approve those tonight. I think that we saw that there was a problem that was starting to happen, and we changed the code in a fashion that prevented that from happening, and to move with stricter regulations when I feel like what we have now is working, it is an extra burden that I don't really think we need to put on our community. I remember the research we did a couple of years ago from visitors, 2 sisters, and we were asking them, why did you come here? What did you do? Where did you stay? All those kinds of things. And what we heard over and over again is there's not enough places here to stay. And there's absolutely not enough places to stay that are reasonably priced. So I think that it does provide a service to our community. And I just don't see the downside of it in anything that I've had prepared, that I've seen that's come across. I haven't seen any of those negatives, not that I can't be convinced. And what I've read since has not changed that. I am a little bit intrigued about the 2-tier possibility of owner occupied short-term rentals being treated differently than the VRBOs or whatever, because the owner occupies, I can definitely have more sympathy with their situation in their ability to be able to own a home in Sisters, with the ability to have that and to use it for certain situations. And possibly we could do a 2-tier that would, maybe the license would be different, or some advantage or disadvantage to the how many feet situation, maybe 500 feet for non-home owner occupied ones. But then I'm afraid we might be getting into, we're giving, have a taking against one and not against the other, and might end up with legal issues. So if y'all are not in agreement with that, then I think we have to wait till Gary gets here, unless Michael decides he wants to weigh in. So so I would like to talk about what you guys, why you think it's important to have a total prohibition in the UGB. If you do think that that's important, what's the thinking for having a total prohibition in the UGB?
Well, for my part, I'm not a strong proponent of this, but I would be curious as to what the findings are. And if the findings are that, yeah, we do have a problem, then I would be in favor of moving forward.
So you think the research that's already been done does not give us enough of a finding of
So,
what
well-
harm is or isn't being done?
Well, you've already indicated yourself that you don't see any harm right now, whereas Jennifer has indicated she does. So it'd be nice to know, is there harm or is there not?
I'm not sure what research would show that.
I think
Well, I
she's
feel-
referring to the findings of fact for a moratorium. Council President was talking about the strategy to adopt code that would essentially limit or ban short-term rentals in the expansion areas of the
Right.
urban growth boundary.
Those findings
That's different
only
than a
pertain to the
It
moratorium.
would only be for the more, yeah, it would,
The-
yeah, so
the
the,
total moratorium, just not a,
Or the pause, whatever they,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
not to the not to the prohibiting them outright in the UGB
Okay.
forever, not just during a moratorium.
so if the city expanded the urban growth boundary, we're going through this couple-year effort, there wouldn't be, and I'm not sure how that policy gets implemented through the code, but, through the master planning process or annexation agreements or whatever, that short-term rentals would
We're
not be
talking
allowed.
number 6.
That's number
What-
4.
Number 4. Yeah, okay. No, I don't have, personally, I don't have a problem with number 2, 3, or 4. And I understand the issues with 5, and I understand the complexity of 7. I don't want to skip over number 1, though. I think that satisfies the number 7 issue as the mayor was, as the city manager was saying. So, that's where I'm sitting right now, and I'm not really sure about number 6 at all. But I don't really have a feeling about that one. Where are you on this now? Can you?
Number 1, number 5.
Totally third different place.
Okay,
So, the survey was great, and I thank everybody for the participation on that. It did change some of my opinions on this to get the feedback from some community members. So one data point, before I say what I'm feeling, one data point I think we're missing is the value created by an occupied residence. The value to a community where there is somebody or multiple people living in a property and their contribution to our community on a daily basis, the amount of money that they spend in our community every day, the amount of volunteer work they do, the business they bring, all those things. Because when we have properties that are being utilized in a very limited capacity with transient occupation, they do come and they spend money and we get some TLT dollars, and that's great, but that is for a small percentage of the year. A home occupied by
period.
somebody is, I live here full year round. I'm in some store in town every day.
Mhm.
And overhearing a lot of those business owners in the off months saying, ugh, it's rough, it's tough. It's bad this year. And so that's kind of a data point we're missing in this. the value of an occupied house. We're not getting that. We know the value of an STR, and we all know the numbers and the TLT and all that kind of stuff, but I mean, if there's a way to quantify that, I'm sure somebody's done a study on that or something. I mean, nothing we need to bend over backwards, but I feel that's missing in the conversation at least. You know, and that's, you know, a separate conversation from, look, anything we can do to free up housing supply, to take the burden off of, homeless, to take the burden off of workforce that can't live here, because there isn't anywhere for them to live, but they're part of our community, working every day and then taking their wages home to somewhere else and paying taxes somewhere else and spending their money somewhere else, which is not a good thing. So, you know, that's kind of, I think, what's missing in the conversation. Ultimately, I'm still kind of at a point where if I can wave my magic wand, I'm okay with number 3. Because we're already seeing that happen. I do have some questions about some specifics about the commercial zone, especially the Pacific Crest property. That large undeveloped property is within that zone. So that would be inconvenient for them to have no holds barred development of STRs there when that's kind of critical housing stock land. But otherwise, I have no problem with 3. I don't actually think we need concentration limits on condos because I think condos are a better use of STRs. Yeah, I would like to look, I mean, I know this is down the road, but I'd like to look into, you know, number 4. I don't know, you know, what, Councillor Blum brought up, you know, the survey made me much more sympathetic to people who have the owner occupied SDRs and how important that is to their ability to survive in an expensive community. And so that was eye-opening for me and really great input. So I feel like I think you know, the buffer is a really great tool, but it's not equitable by any means. You know, it does not give any special or even equal treatment to people who live full-time in our community versus people who live far away and happen to own a property here. And ultimately, you know, like I said, if I could do what I wanted, I would, the biggest change I would make is I would pull all the permits for single family homes. 1 unit on 1 property. I don't think that those are necessary. And I think they're a detriment to the community and housing stock at this moment in time of all the challenges that we're seeing. So, you know, obviously with some sort of glide path on how long they can continue to operate until that is pulled. So, and I know communities have done that. I don't know to that specificity, but so that's where I'm at. But number 1, I don't love it, but it at least almost stops the process. It doesn't provide any more stock. It doesn't roll anything back, housing stock, but it at least kind of has that same impact as doing moratorium with less legal issues. So, yeah, I think I don't think the 3 of us are anywhere close to each other.
Number 1, I think, would, as we grew, that would end up making the percentage of housing that was short-term rentals decline significantly, especially if we prohibited it in the UGB. Because there just wouldn't be any place for them, new ones, to be. So literally, we would be saying what's here now is pretty much, you know, there are little spots here and there that maybe would get one, but as we increased in population, that percent total percentage would significantly start going down. And it's already gone down from, it was around 10 when we were looking at it before, and now it's down to 5. And that's just because of the increased. I doubt we've lost too many short-term rentals.
What's 10 to 5?
The percentage of short-term rentals to the total housing stock in the community is about 5 now, you're saying percent?
Yeah, when we originally started, it was just around 5%. Yeah, and we continue to establish more subdivision or residential lots to be, and continue to develop those lots. So that percentage
Go up.
will go down.
Yeah.
Continues to go down and would go markedly down with the increase in a buffer or other limitations.
You can have, correct me if I'm wrong, but because of the transferability doesn't apply to post 2018. If, say a property sells and it lapses and they don't re-up and now they're caught within the, the 500. So you could actually decrease.
Yeah,
Short-term rentals.
it will likely decrease.
So how about this, Counselor or Vice President Blum? So,
President, not
Yeah.
vice president.
sorry, President,
That's fine.
sorry.
You can call me Andrea.
Sorry. Okay, so if we were to expand the limit from 250 to 500 and then on number 4, keep that same 500-foot limit in number 4. I mean, so all growth would be a 500 or a 700 limit or something, but then that allows at least some STRs. Would you be comfortable with that kind of?
Well, I just haven't
Arrangement.
heard a reason why is it that that you don't want short-term rentals in any area that we would annex?
Well, there are studies of other cities that have shown that with the increase of STRs, there was a definite decrease in available rental and for month to month. And when you don't have rental for month to month, then your workforce doesn't have,
Yeah,
so
and
there is
I've read all
that.
as well.
Right, and that's it. That's the problem.
But that doesn't really apply to sisters.
How does it not? Apply
Because
to-
we've looked at the statistics and the statistics don't show that is happening here.
So what is happening here?
That with the increase of STRs, that we didn't have enough available,
Because our
houses for
STRs
rent.
are decreasing, they're not increasing.
with
Well, the
the,
percentage, but the number is still increasing.
Right, yeah, absolutely. But there's more, there's more housing going in with a lower percentage of them being short-term rentals. I just haven't heard a good argument because I don't see that happening here. I see the percentage that we're losing short-term rentals, especially if we go to 500 feet, we will lose short-term rentals that would have come in that will not come in. And the overall percentage will continue to go down. So I just don't, the 500 feet is going to include some areas of the town that right now would allow it. So why would you think that property coming in an annexation should be treated differently than those areas?
well, the
Because
point-
the point of a UGB expansion, number one point is housing.
Okay,
It's to create housing.
yeah.
So that would be kind of counterproductive. I mean, obviously, an UGB expansion will also have things like parks and industrial lands and work lands and stuff like that. But that is kind of the number one point, right, is housing's the biggest driver of that. So
And the point of this whole exercise is to contain STRs
Mm,
because they cause a,
that is not,
That's
the
not
point of
your
this
perspective,
exercise to
yeah,
me
but-
was to determine whether there was a livability aspect to short-term rentals and whether or not those short-term rentals were impacting affordable housing and whether or not they were a nightmare for crime and other things in our community.
so, I mean, nobody can find a place to rent. Isn't that an indicator?
Not if none of these houses would be appropriate to rent.
oh, that's not true.
not none, but very few would be affordable housing.
Well, it doesn't matter. It's, there's just, I mean, Eric was talking about a business in town that couldn't, they tried to hire a upper level manager and they couldn't get a house and turned the house down. I mean, turned the job down, a well-paying job,
Yeah.
And that I think is one of many, many stories. We just don't hear these stories because these people don't live here. They're somewhere else.
They
So we
can't
don't
get
get
here.
to, we don't get to hear the stories of the workforce that can't work here. So, and I will speak to, another thing I think that came out of the survey that I think was very valid and unfortunately is out of our control is that, the landlord tenant laws are, have moved into the more of the favor of the tenant. And, a lot of, it's putting up a lot of barriers or incentives for anybody
They
to
don't
long-term
wanna
rent
rent, yeah.
their property.
I saw that in the survey a lot.
Yeah,
Even If
and
I
that's-
could, I would not,
Yeah.
I would not rent this house out because it's too much of a nightmare.
And there's truth to that. So, it was good to see that again. However, there's a number of these houses that have been purchased strictly to be short-term rental. And and I'm talking about the single family residences. And if that opportunity is taken away, they have only a couple options. One of them is to sell the house. It is no longer a great business for me. And if they're looking at it as a business, which they should, then that's what business people do is like, I will need to now sell this property and move on to something else.
And in other
invest.
places
So-
that has lowered the value of homes in the area, which depending on who you are, is a good thing.
Right.
For sure.
It's not a bad thing. There's
Yeah,
nothing bad
well,
about
yeah,
that.
it's not really bad. Okay,
So- I know.
I'm not sure we're there. We may need Gary.
Yeah.
I think Gary was.
I'd like
he
to
was
hear us.
leaning much more in your favor than in my way of looking at it. But is there some that we can agree on?
I mean, it's,
Or would that be favorable, or would it be better to just bring it up another time?
I mean, to be honest, I think, it'd be helpful for staff to get some direction on, is there agreement on at least a few of these? That we could start crafting an ordinance. We've had 3 or 4 work sessions.
Yep.
And then you add the planning commission work sessions, and there is the option of, we do the ones that there seems to be broad agreement or a majority agreement on. And nothing stops us from continuing to work on this and study this and evaluate. And, some of these are more
Prove what we
complex.
can and postpone.
Yeah, some of
what we
these are the
can't.
legal questions and stuff and the primary residence versus not. We can continue to look at that and look at the case law that's emerging on these, but at least get some of these low hanging fruit, but some of the broad agreement ones into place so that we kind of achieve sort of the majority sentiment about where we're at with short-term rentals, and then, yeah, continue to evaluate and study some of these other more complex strategies.
So, I mean, could we consider, I'm hearing you, so we could consider keeping the limit as it is in the town, but then having, in the urban growth boundary, having it at 500
uh,
feet boundary.
I'm not
You're,
interested in that.
you're not, that doesn't, okay.
And I mean, and I would like solutions that are pretty clean,
Mhm.
I don't, the more we're I don't want a piecemeal. I don't want it, from this date and that date. And if you live,
Yeah,
people like clean government and so I'm trying to, I mean, I know there's not going to be a one size fits all solution though.
I think you probably would have 3 counselors who would be in agreement to go to 500 feet
mm-hmm.
in the existing, if I'm reading Gary's comments right. You guys probably, I think he was pretty much leaning on that.
I'm open to number one
Yeah.
Okay.
as an
I
option.
can't speak for Gary, but I'm
think
I'm
it
very
was.
flexible on this because I think, it's a process where we could do a step
Right.
and then maybe do STR work, and other counselors do it in another 5 years, but
And the concentration limits to condos. See, I've had family who lived in condos and they had neighborhoods just like my neighborhood. So I kind of see that there shouldn't be a concentration of short-term rentals around condos necessarily, although in my own neighborhood, there is a concentration, but
There's a, expand, there's, you know, and the market is changing, the lodging market is changing to try to accommodate this desire to have more homey accommodations, and you're starting to see these businesses, I mean, and we see it actually in Sisters, you know, like the cottage one behind us
Mhm.
here, and you know, or condos that are being built, but you can own them, and they're each individually owned, but you can use them as an STR, or you can live in them, or, you know, they're, I think the lodging market is shifting, which I knew would happen. It's kind of slow, but, so I'm a little hesitant on that, especially with the definition of condo, and so we need to. move that.
Okay, can we all agree not to apply it to commercial? Are you,
For the most part, like I said, I had some concern about, uh, basically one property in that commercial zone, so.
and I think maybe, I would,
What was the problem with the one property in the commercial zone?
Oh, just that it's, well, it's that 9 acres right up here that's undeveloped, but it's
Uh-huh.
in the commercial zone that could be,
yeah, that's not residential, that's zone commercial.
yeah.
I'm just asking.
Down
what-
commercial, yeah, I mean, so it's kind of like, would you want that to all be STRs?
Well, it could be a hotel. right?
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, the hope is that that's housing, and it sounds like it could possibly finally be housing, so I don't want it to be.
Well, I mean, the concentration we're talking about is expanding concentration from 250 to 500.
No, but
so-
it says no, number
but
3.
number
I
3 is
know-
to not apply that. So the concentration could be much less. You could have all STRs in
Could I
commercial zone.
Finish what I was
Yes.
saying. The concentration limit from 250 to 500, it's already 250 now today. Is it 250 in the commercial zone today?
No,
So there's no limit in the commercial zone today.
commercial districts are exempt from the concentration limit today.
And then the commercial zone, there's that little bit of wiggle room where you could also, because in the commercial zone, hotels are allowed, and there is a very blurred line kind of, well, the STR definition is residential
Dwelling unit, yeah.
dwelling unit. But that could, anyway, that could get blurred.
Because there are, a lot of businesses that, in some commercial zones where they have the business on the bottom and the living space on top. And I mean, I don't see why we wouldn't want to make sure that, there was a limit on STRs there.
Okay, so we're not in agreement. I would prefer to,
One
UG
suggestion,
Hmm?
sorry, just one suggestion.
Yeah.
It kind of pops to mind if you want to parse out different parts of the downtown commercial. You remember how we created those overlay zones where, you didn't have to have, you could do a residential only type of project in the downtown commercial versus the requirement for mixed use. We have kind of 3 different overlay zones.
Mhm.
Potentially, if you want to parse those out, that could be a tool potentially you could use.
Okay.
I'm not in favor of limiting transferability. I think we've already limited it to everything.
Yeah,
And
that's.
so, I don't think we need to increase the days required in the sense that a lot of people have said, hey, I just have this in order to block a short-term rental from, and they pay their license. I don't have any problem with that. And the moratorium, I would say that would be a no. So there's.
I mean,
a
I
couple-
have some interest in 5, but, I have some questions about it.
I'm sorry, was 4 kind of a universal agreement that is supported, at least by the 3 here?
4?
Number 4?
Yeah, prohibit in the expansion areas, the UGB expansion areas.
Yeah, but I feel that's a second, there's nothing to do about that now, is there?
Well, we could do it now, but I think when we're looking
modify
at,
that.
at the annexation,
Hmm.
that might be,
A better time.
depending upon what the project is that's
Mhm.
coming in, we might want to say, well, that actually would be good for it,
Yeah.
or it wouldn't. So
Right.
it might be better
I
not
agree, it doesn't
until
make
you
any
know
sense
what's
right
going to
now.
be annexed.
Or an alternative is you write into code, one example being that it not allowed in areas that are outside of the current city limits as of a particular date or something to that effect, meaning like the current urban growth boundary
I mean,
or contemplated at the time of
Okay, we've got
annexation.
about a minute, folks. So Do you,
I mean, the revising of the STRs came about with a lot of concerns about STRs. I mean, the public was concerned. That's what I remember. There were letters to the editor and all this stuff. And so, I mean, if, you know, minimally, I would want us to do the 500 feet. If we're not going to do anything else.
okay,
You know?
the reason I felt like we did this is one, because when we implemented it, we said in a few years, we need to go back and see if this is working. Because we're always changing codes because we anticipate a certain remedy. And then we come back and we look at it. We got some testimony from some people about short-term rentals that we said, oh, okay, yeah, well, let's see about that. And I felt that the information that we got refuted
The
the
concerns.
drama of the people who were super concerned about it, or person, if I remember. No, but yeah, there are definitely people who think short-term rentals are the demon spawn. And, you know, I had just have seen no evidence in Sisters that that's the situation.
And then I feel like, yeah, the reviews also that we have many issues related to housing, homelessness and workforce
In
housing
addition
and,
to-
yeah.
yeah, this is
And
just
that-
one
That's
little-
my biggest concern. I don't think it is. Yeah, I think the issue of bad neighbors and rowdiness and stuff like that. I mean, I don't deny that it exists on occasion, but it, to me, yeah, does
Just
not.
a lack
not
of affordable, you know, either expensive or there's very few rentals in this town,
And,
period,
and I feel like we need to be making some
month to month.
positive movements one way or another, partially because it sends a signal to the community. It's the greater community. It also sends a signal to Washington and Salem. Hey, we're doing stuff. We're trying to address this. I would just think it would put us in a better position to get funding for other projects related to housing. I mean, if they had to pick and choose and we said, well, hey, we've done this, this, and this, make us pretty sexy for
Our record
more
is
money.
stellar. So what do you suggest?
Staff can correct me, but, I mean, if we have somewhat of consensus on number one, and then, you know, sort of some options for for 3 and 4, I would suggest maybe what we do is draft up some code language and bring it back, do another work session, but at least you have the ordinance in front of you with like, here are the proposed changes. And then maybe like, we'll continue to study these other things too. But just to keep moving the ball down the field, I think we'd draft that up.
Okay, and you know, talk to Gary a little bit and just see if,
Yeah.
you know, if he's where he is.
And I don't want to force you guys into action. I mean, if you want to continue to
No,
work on this and study that, that's fine, but,
Well, I think
Sometimes.
we have enough information. We just are interpreting it somewhat differently. So,
And there's just the three of us, and so.
yeah.
You know,
Sometimes seeing the draft code language in context can help spur the discussion along one way or another. And
Right.
like we said, changes can be made up until the very last minute. So even through the public hearing process.
And if you can, I imagine something's out there, some grad student did this of kind of quantifying the value of an occupied
Hmm.
house versus compared to other uses. I think that would be really helpful because we're really ignoring the value of our community members who are here every day.
And those who would like to be here every day.
Yeah, who are already our community members. They just have to go live somewhere else.
Yeah, they have to live in Redmond where they can afford the rent and.
So I know we're closing out, but I want to make sure that I've captured just in one last summary. Just to want to say it explicitly. So there's consensus on pursuing expanding the concentration limit to 500 feet. The second being not applying the concentration limit to the commercial districts as it is today, and prohibiting short-term rentals in UGB expansion areas. Is what I heard consensus on.
I don't think we agreed to prohibit in the UGB. I
Or-
think we agreed to kick that can until we,
Okay. Glad of clarifying. The one that I thought we were getting close to consensus one way or the other was applying the concentration limit to condominiums, whereas today those are exempt.
I think they should be applied to condominium.
And the reason I do, I mean, I have a friend who has a purchase of a property in Redmond and it's condominiums. And almost all of them are STRs. So she's purchased it, but her son has no neighbors. You know, it's just, it's weird.
And would that have its own limits? Because, you know, it's a layer cake of housing and stuff.
No, one STR per property, so condos are in and of it, by definition, one property, so they're part of a multifamily development, so one STR moving per
So if there
property.
was two condos next to each other, they could have one each, even if they were within 250 feet.
Today, because
Today.
they're exempt from the concentration buffer. If we applied it there, you'd only get one per property. Instead of
But-
the example of all being,
About platted, it's not like, because condos don't have deeded land, is that?
correct. Yeah, it's the unit, not the land. Yep. Well, we can craft it as for consideration, yeah. But thank you for
Yeah,
Re-
yeah.
really
So we
working
can
to-
meet on that one.
okay.
We'll be
Yeah,
back.
we agree on number 2. Yay.
We'll be back at a quarter till. Sorry.
Oh, I lost again.
Yep.
All right. Recording's going, everybody? All right, I'd like to call to order the Valentine's edition of our regular city council meeting. It is 6:44 PM. Please, if you can, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Or if you want. Totally go on. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. Roll call, Carrie, please.
Mayor Preden,
I'm here.
Council President Blum,
Here.
Counselor Lutz.
Here.
Counselor Ross, Counselor Cobb.
Here.
Okay, Counselor Ross is not with us and won't be with us tonight. Next up is the approval of the agenda. Need a motion and a second, please?
Move approval of the agenda.
A second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Any dissension? Okay. Visitor communication. I'm asking if there's any visitor communication.
There was one submitted for online. I do not see that person on the line.
Okay. Well. All right, thank you very much. Next up is the consent agenda. I need a motion and a second on the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any dissension? No? 4-0. On to councilor business. Let's get right into it. We got a little ordinance going on. Ordinance 537. An ordinance granting TDS Broadband Service LLC, a Wisconsin limited liability company, the right and privilege to provide and operate a cable system within the city of Sisters and to place, erect, lay, maintain, and operate in, upon, over, and under the public streets. Also, the alleys, the avenues, the thoroughfares, the highways, places, and grounds within City of Sisters, poles, wires, and other applications and conductors for all cable system purposes. So I'm going to open the public hearing, and it's time for staff comments in the report, and I think that's going to be our consultant, or, oh, that's going to be you?
Yeah, I think I'll do the introduction. We do have Jeremy
you.
Green, our city attorney. He's on the line, on the phone, here virtually. So, he'll be able to answer questions, about the franchise. Jeremy did do the negotiations, which, I understand was, quite the process over the last, year or so, to negotiate this franchise. So Yeah, as you know, the city uses the franchise model for granting utilities the right to use our public rights of way through our home rule authority. And so this ordinance would grant a 10-year franchise with TDS broadband, TDS broadband, which formerly the city had a franchise with the Bend Cable Communications Company dating back to 1998. So this franchise, which was assigned to TDS Broadband and subsidiary, expired this last year. And so Jeremy's been negotiating with TDS on a new franchise, which outlines, sort of the rules and the rights and privileges that TDS has to use our right of way. In exchange for that, the city does get the 5% of gross revenues, which is essentially it grants them the right to use our right of ways and reimburse the public for that use. Franchise fees we collect from all utilities that use the public right of ways, and they go into our street fund, which helps with street operations and maintenance and pavement management, to kind of offset the impact of having those rights of ways be used by the utilities. So this would be a 10-year with additional 10 years that could be extended by mutual agreement. In addition to the franchise fee, we also negotiated to have cable service provided at 4 of our facilities. Whether we use that or not, that would be up to our discretion, but also up to the discretion of the franchise to provide that cable service. But we at least have that option now in this franchise agreement. And then, like I said, Jeremy's here to answer any questions about any of the specifics in the franchise, or staff can as well. And we are seeking the council adoption of Ordinance 537.
Okay, can we put the game up here during city council meetings? Is that what you mean? We can get cable, ESPN,
Yeah.
Sports Center, net? No?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Standard or the,
Possibly.
premium tier, right?
Okay. Jeremy, did you want to add anything to that?
Mayor, I do not. Jordan, that was fantastic. Well done. I would just simply say that the franchise agreement is consistent with the other franchise agreements that we have developed for you all over the past few years. I believe it adequately protects the city, adequately ensures that TDS has the ability to utilize our right-of-way consistent with their objectives as well. And as Jordan correctly pointed out, it is a 5% franchise fee. The reason for that and not 7 is driven by statutory limitations with respect to this particular service, that is cable services. But otherwise, yes, it was a very long negotiation, approximately 6 or 7 months, but I'm glad we have a solid document to present to you all for approval this evening.
All right, thank you. I'll ask the rest of council if they have any questions of staff or of legal regarding this. None? Go ahead.
Yeah, clarification. This is city collects about 50,000 in revenue from the franchise fee. That's annually.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, yeah, my other question was about why it was 5 and not 7%, but you answered that. Thank you.
They have a better lobby,
Yeah.
so they got it 5.
Well, broadband's hot right now.
Yeah.
Everybody wants broadband.
Is it permissible to ask why it took 6 months? What was the difference between the previous agreement and this agreement that was so difficult to negotiate?
So I would simply respond to that by saying that has been kind of the MO in working with TDS at times as it relates to developing these franchise agreements. I would tell you that this particular franchise agreement is much more, we'll say, city favorable relative to prior franchise agreements that may have been presented and ultimately negotiated with TDS. And because of that, perhaps it was a bit more difficult to negotiate.
Well said, thank you.
Fair enough. All right, any other questions? I don't have any questions. All right. Before I ask for public comments, it does say I should ask if there's any revisions from the posted. No?
There are none.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any public comments
I have none submitted and no one on the line.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, I'm going to close the public portion of this hearing, and now we have council deliberations, if there needs to be any. Do we need to change the language of this at all, or say we want more than 5%? Even if,
Even though it's illegal.
right, well, statutory, that sounds flexible to me.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just kidding.
I would move to have the city manager read ordinance number 537 by title only.
Second.
All right, the motion has been made and seconded. Let's vote to read by title only. Do we need to do that by roll call? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. The motion carries. The city manager will read the ordinance by title.
This is ordinance number 537, an ordinance granting TDS Broadband Service LLC, a Wisconsin limited liability company, the right and privilege to provide and operate a cable system within City of Sisters and to place, erect, lay, maintain, and operate in, upon, over, and under the public streets, alleys, avenues, thoroughfares, highways, places, and grounds within City of Sisters, poles, wires, and other appliances and conductors for all cable system purposes. That's all one sentence.
All right,
I move to approve and adopt ordinance number 537.
Second.
the motion is made and seconded. We vote by roll call. Council President Blum,
Aye.
Councilor Letts,
Aye.
Councilor Cobb,
Aye.
I'm Mayor Preden, and I am an aye. The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you all, council. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Jeremy. Take care. Stay
Bye.
in.
You too.
Happy Valentine's.
Yeah, thanks. Susan, just so you know, every once in a while we might, just for a second, just in case there were final deliberations. Obviously, there weren't any, but just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
It didn't say deliberate.
I know, but I've done this a few times and I know it's in there just in case we need it.
Okay.
On a contentious issue, this was obviously not contentious at all, so.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. I appreciate it though. It was faster, so. Other business, looks like we're gonna have a quarterly financial review. Director of Finance O'Neill, how's it going?
Pretty good, thank you.
Yeah. I'm just
Okay.
talking because I didn't get to talk for a whole hour, so I have a
That's
lot to get
okay.
out.
I didn't put more, after thinking about this during the workshop, I should have put more Valentine's Day puns in the presentation.
Yep.
So I apologize for that. I did not.
We would have loved it. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I'm disappointed.
Your inner
Disappointing again. Let's see here. Okay, so this is the second quarter financial review. So all the statistics for this review will kind of encapsulate the first 6 months of the fiscal year. And as in other financial reviews, you'll see a lot of trends as this presentation goes on. On the revenue side, and to start, we'll go through the revenue summary, then the expense summary as we typically do. As is pretty obvious, on the revenue side, you see that we received the 98% of property taxes. And I think for the city, we've received about 90% already, which is good because we kind of averaged that 95% collectability, and a little higher actually in the URA. So both good, really positive signs there of collectability. Let's see, moving kind of below that to the franchise fees and park fees, those are all tracking with expectations. Most of the franchise fees, again, to Jordan's point, are in the street fund. So, with TDS, their fees, CEC, et cetera, those all go into the street fund and take into account a lot of the projects that we do there to backfill. Let's see, the next one, other income and expenses. That is kind of a low lapse rate, largely due to that URA transfer that's going to take place here actually this month, when you all adopted that. The local gas tax, the next line item here, I'll try to use my laser pointer a little bit more. That's tracking with expectations as well. We haven't seen too much of a dip in that, especially with kind of some of the trends we're seeing with tourism. So that's been interesting, but that's tracking with expectations. Definitely pay closer attention to that, mostly as the kind of the fourth quarter starts and the spring starts and we have more activity. SCCs, as was the case in the last presentation, those are down significantly. Not a lot of not a lot of revenue there. We have a little bit with the woodlands. Personalized nutrients building was a significant SDC revenue stream, but we will see more come online as, you know, phase one Sunset Meadows comes online and those things. But again, really not used to seeing that low of a percentage compared to what we have seen in the last 3 years, 4 years, really. Nothing too concerned, just to, you know, make sure that we consider those things, you know, in our studies and our evaluations, looking forward, especially with the master plans, so forth. And water and sewer receipts, you know, for the second quarter, you see that's water's at 60%. We've seen water, even though the usage has gone down, the revenue has stayed actually fairly steady. And that's largely due a lot of newer accounts over the past, you know, 6 months to a year. So that's kind of buoying that revenue line item. We'll probably in the third quarter see that crest down a little bit to maybe the lower 50 percentile, but I don't think it'll be any lower than that. And then sewer receipts, as always, those you typically stay fairly steadily throughout the year. See those at 51%. And then the transit room tax, another interesting one. You know, just kind of analyzing a lot of the larger lodging operators, they were down. You know, I would say on average about 8%, mostly in December, which has kind of been, you know, maybe representative of the interesting winter that we've had, whether it be good weather, bad weather. You know, people come here for maybe different reasons. So some interesting things to pay close attention to. Even haven't got a lot of January numbers yet because they're due typically on the 15th of the month. We have got one lodging operator that was down about 20% year over year. So that was also interesting just to see kind of where things are. But again, you know, it's so weather dependent. I feel like at times that that's probably the main driver. If you remember, the weather was pretty gnarly there in a lot of parts of January.
I think that's echoed in our retail sales as well.
Yeah, and it's not so much, I mean, the weather was bad here, but the weather was really bad where people would have been coming from. So
Right.
stop them from even leaving their house.
Mm-hmm. And then the shared revenue and grants is tracking with budget expectations. So those are the main points on the revenue side. Do you have any questions about that?
Anybody have any questions?
Just collectively on the percentages that are under expectation, collectively, all of them, are you sound like you're not really concerned at this juncture.
No, no, because I think that, you know, if the spring, and more referring to, you know, gas tax, lodging tax, if the spring, you know, trends in the way that it has in the past, I see that coming back. But, you know, I think that, and also in terms of strategy, you know, it's not too impactful. I mean, we shoot for a number. Sometimes, you know, we can't control, you know, what happens, kind of in the region, especially with weather,
Yeah.
and as it relates to transient room tax.
And the fourth quarter goes all the way to July 1. So, you know, it's spring, but it's really early summer.
Yeah.
A lot of our events start hitting, and, you know, stuff like the water where it's at 60% when you kind of feel like it should be maybe more like 70 or 75%. It actually starts catching up as people start watering lawns and things like that too, right?
But
Yeah,
you
and
you are comparing now with this time a few years ago, right? I mean,
I am, yeah.
we're talking about, right?
And yeah, it's interesting, you know, you get compared to certain lodging providers that are indicative of kind of the tourism numbers. It tells you a lot. But conversely, going back to when our campground reservations went live, those were up
Those were.
10%. So I think, again, the interest is here. It leaves me a little bit more optimistic, but there's that variable of the weather, especially in the winter months, that I think is hard to determine.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm most concerned about STCs a little bit because that just means a little quieter, you know, winter than we've had in a while.
Yep.
And fall, to be honest, and not as many bigger projects coming through. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, for sure.
But I've seen a couple things on the drawing board that are coming soon.
Yep,
If not this year, early next year's fiscal year. So
right.
pretty interesting to see what those projects might bring to the table. So
Of course. Mhm.
any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
And then moving on to the expense side, so it has been a fairly quiet fall with capital projects. And the notes on capital outlay are fairly similar to the first quarter. Bigger projects that we had slated for later in the fiscal year, such as splash pad retrofit, well one improvements, overlays, west side pump station design, roundabout, of course. Those will be taking place in these last two quarters. So that's the main reason why you see the capital outlay down at least this part of the year, as you will. But I think the other thing I noted in there was the one fund that did have a lot of activity was the sewer fund. We had the biosolids removal project, and that came in a little bit over budget expectations. And then we also had a change order. So we'll be coming to you with the supplemental budget for that probably a little bit later in the year. That was the only kind of funky, capital outlay line item that we noticed when conducting the analysis. So that's let's see, I think that's the end of cap outlay notes. Again, the majority of debt service was paid in late November. We've got some more debt to be paid June 1. That's just with our regular bonds. And then we have our little debt transfer with the city of URA to go into the third quarter as well. And then overall personnel services are under expectations, which is good. We're a little bit short staffed, as you know, in public works. That probably has the most reason for that. And then a little bit in materials and services. You notice that I think the water, the street and the sewer were just over 50%, I think about 51. And if you looked a little closer in those, you'd see, I think, and I've said this to you before, but when our insurance comes out in July. So that skews materials and services a little bit. For the water fund, we do buy meters and parts a little bit ahead of time just to make sure we have those in stock. So that can sometimes add a kind of a skewed cost. In addition to that, some contract services are kind of been front loaded in the year as opposed to later in the year. And then things like street improvements. We did actually do a pretty big street improvement project, if you remember, earlier in the fiscal year. And then and some sewer projects as
Next year, my street gets next.
right. Oh, that's right. So nothing concerning there, but just some items of note. And I think that's
So has
about
the
it.
shortage in staffing in public works ended up having a lot of overtime? Or-
Yes, it did. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've seen that probably the last 5 or 6 weeks, actually.
So
Yeah.
how far are we into hiring again?
So, that's a great question. I was going to make it part of my presentation, but I'm glad you asked about it. Yeah, we've had some interest. It's just tough to get qualified people who are kind of willing to do the work, quite frankly, that those folks are able to do, because it is diverse and it's difficult. So we have to find the right people, and we have, but that search is ongoing.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to ask about the supplemental budget on the biosolids. Is that going to be two different items? One's an overage and one of them is the change order, or does it come just in one?
Just
shot?
comes at one.
Okay.
Yep, just comes in one
Just
there.
interested. Okay, anything else?
Yes, so you remind me again where the payments to Deschutes County Sheriff falls in
Yeah, that goes out of the general fund, materials and services.
material and service.
Mm-hmm.
So is it a problem to break that out so that we could see what portion of material and services is going for our safety?
Sure, I can break that out for you. Yeah.
That's okay with everybody? I mean, I think it's just an interesting number to
It's-
know.
It's a lot of it.
Yeah.
It sure is. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. Yeah, I can do that.
Make that a blue slice and change capital outlay to a different color.
Yeah, we could have some fun with that. I know.
Just,
Gosh, I missed the opportunity. I could have been a heart,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
I mean,
a heart,
Thin blue line.
Oh,
Not so thin
bad.
blue line.
Next
yeah,
time.
right, a blue, big.
Next time we have a,
I wish.
4th of July, you can use red.
Valentine's Day.
blue, and
Oh, yeah.
okay,
Any more?
that's all I have.
Good job again. Anything else? All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
We've been looking at Scott the whole time and not you guys.
No.
Well, that doesn't hurt my feelings.
It's better than Scott on
Very-
Zoom. Remember Scott on Zoom? He looked a little bit like, like he was in Nam or something. It was kind of weird. Okay, I think we're on to staff comments. I'd like to introduce the city manager,
Thank you, Mayor.
Jordan David Wheeler.
You even know my middle name.
Yeah, I do my homework.
That's not creepy.
I'll keep this brief. Paul is taking a breather. He was out doing some plowing this afternoon, and then he's got the early shift. So the crews will be out at midnight. They were doing some afternoon plowing, especially with the school routes. Snow's been coming down. We have the downtown sidewalk contractor coming in at, I think, 2 a.m. To do that work. And like I said, the crews will be out at midnight to try to clean it all up, hoping that it starts to slow down so we can get everything cleared up and piled up for the rest of the week. And then also on Public Works, sent the note out about the bids on the US 20 and Locust Street roundabout, which was pretty fantastic news. As we had hoped, I think we had a good timing on getting the bid let. And I think there was 5 that came in, so well under the engineer's estimate, which is good news for us and ODOT. So we'll be hopefully moving forward quickly on that project as planned. I think a mid-March timeline for construction to start is what the contractor is kind of thinking they can do. And there will be a business meeting on the 27th to kind of talk about the impacts from construction and get their input. And I think there's another open house about the
March
project.
4th at
March.
the elementary school, I believe, and they'll send out information on that. It's not completely confirmed, but that's the tentative, and I believe it's an afternoon 4 or 4:30.
Yes, that sounds familiar. So yeah, that information will be coming out. I know there's lots of questions from folks about the
New school or old school?
Old school.
old school. This is the area of impact is we're right here. So there's going to be questions about impact to school, school drop off and pick up and
We could start early. I mean, that'd be great because that's the 2-week spring break. I mean,
Right.
that'd be a really great time for them to take advantage of nobody being there.
that's what we're thinking too. And again, the goal is to kind of get the bulk of that, the most impactful work done by Memorial Day to have the town ready to go for the busy season.
Yeah, Paul mentioned that the first thing that's gonna happen is getting the fence up on the property line, so there's no safety issues whatsoever. So that's like one of the first things that's.
I'll turn it over to Carrie. We had a good meeting on the subcommittee to look at the proposals for the chamber building or the Main Street building.
Yep.
Uh,
Are you done?
Yep.
Okay, I'm up. So we had 7 proposals for the Main Street building that came in, and we had a selection committee yesterday morning that reviewed all the applications, and the Sisters Maker group was awarded the lease on the building. And that's a group that is working on doing some makers things. We'll work with Seed to Table and the Farmers Market as part of their group, and also explore Sisters potentially in that front entryway to have kind of a walk-in visitor center unmanned with potential. They're going to look at a lot of things. So, really impressive proposals from a large group of people. It was a difficult selection process, but I'm pretty excited about the group that's going in there. I think there's a lot of great community use that will happen in that building. With it being on the park, I think that's a perfect piece. The CLA, the Leadership Academy, applications are out right now, so if you have anybody that would like to apply, please do. I know we have at least 5 in already. Those are going to C4C, so I'm not seeing those. They're due by March 8th, and then we are doing a review sometime between the 11th and the 13th. And I do have an ask of council, and perhaps, Mayor, you can bring this up during your comments, is I will need 1 counselor to help with that review process, and I don't know exact dates yet, but that's kind of the area we're looking at. And then I will let Jennifer talk to this, but the VIT met today, and I'm taking that staff position over with that group. And I thought it was a very effective and good meeting today. And then just a little follow-up. We met yesterday. Jordan and I did an after-action meeting on the cold weather shelter, worked with Deschutes County Emergency Management, Deschutes County Behavioral Health, and the cold weather shelter folks were all here. And it was, I thought, a very productive meeting discussing kind of how and why emergencies are called and what the process is and where the holes and the gaps were. And it wasn't just specifically with what we did, but they're doing this with all of the cities and all the providers across the county to try to make these emergency stand-ups go a little more smoothly. We got a lot of good information, so I was super happy that they called that and we were able to do that. And unless you have any other questions, that's just a handful of things we're doing.
It's really a small amount. I was on the committee for the Main Street building, and Councilor Todd was as well. And the 7 RFPs were incredible. I mean, just this community is crazy good. It was hard to pick one. It was hard to eliminate one, to be honest with you. So I'm glad I was able to be part of it. Anyway, proud of this town, that's all I can tell you.
Yeah,
Okay,
that wasn't easy. A lot of good options there. Joe, you want to come on back up? Anything else to add?
No, I was gonna talk about the roundabout a little bit, but I'm glad you did. Very well said. So the other thing that we in finance have been working on quite a bit lately is our audit report. So we worked on all the statistics for that and all the management analysis for that. We got it done. Our auditors reviewed it and the Secretary of State has it as of today. They got the URA one today. So that's a great accomplishment. And then they will have the audit report presentation for the 28th. So look forward to that. Been a great experience with those folks. So this is kind of the finish line for that.
that's the first time we've used this auditor, is that correct?
It is, yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
It is.
I'll let you give us the overview at the end when.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, and that's all I have. It's been working on a couple odds and ends projects in finance, but other than that, just business as usual here.
Are there any checks to write tonight?
I don't think we have any.
Signed them. We are, gearing up for budget season.
Yep. Yeah, the spreadsheets are flying around and
Yes.
so that's always fun, putting everything together.
That geeks me out. Any more questions? Thank you,
Okay, thank you.
appreciate it.
Thanks for hanging out, Scott. It's not, but still, thank you.
Just give me the illusion, just get me excited a little bit.
If you need a ride home, I got a seat available.
He did say make this short though, so.
Yeah.
You will give me a ride to Ben? and
If you want.
here to Bronco?
If you want,
Okay.
I'll do
I'll
it.
take you up on that. So the RFP for the consultant for the UGB amendment closed on February 12th, just a few days ago, and we got one proposal. It's from APG, MIG, and that makes sense on a lot of levels that they would go ahead and go after this. So we won't be doing any, we still do an interview just to make sure that they understand the project and they meet the qualifications. We won't be having probably an evaluation committee because there's only one to evaluate. So potentially the good news is maybe we can accelerate this process a little bit, start getting going a little bit quicker. Had a few inquiries, people asking questions, kind of kicking the tires on the URA workforce housing grant fund. Asking questions about different scenarios and how the money might be dispersed. And so, this might be a new situation where we actually have more than one. I think in the past, we've always had one to evaluate. We might have a more of a competitive process this time around. So that's exciting. We have a few land use applications of note right now. We did get an application for a new building, mixed use building downtown next to on the grassy lot next to Dixie's. It's a 3-story building, 6 residential units above commercial. So that is a type 2 review right now. And so it's not intended or to get up to the planning commission or the council level, but we never know how these things might play out. So we'll see how it goes.
So we're apartments?
Yes, either, I don't know if they're going to create them into condominiums or not, but they essentially are, they look like
So
apartments.
they're not overnighters? like the ski in there.
Not, well, that's not how they're framing it. It's framing it more long-term.
But they can be.
They could be,
They could be STRs.
because we don't have a concentration limit. Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
But on the plans, if you look at the plans, they do say apartment, which kind of leads you to a different
Yes.
thing.
Is that something that has to be firmed up during the process, or is it still?
Not really. I mean, if they, they can come in at any time and request a license for that.
Even after.
Or are they in the 250? They're evidently.
So they're in the downtown commercial zone.
Yeah, it's right on Cascade.
They're not subject to a concentration limit.
Oh, okay.
I think historically that piece of property,
It's currently.
correct me if I'm wrong, historically that piece of property was the septic area for the Dixie building years ago before we had a sewer. There's other pieces of grass around town, one next to my building, which that is
That's a
what
good-
it was. So,
Yeah, that's a good.
so
that's-
it's
that's
improving a
something to be
property
aware
that
of,
couldn't have
and
been improved before the city put a sewer.
it's a good question to ask them and maybe to.
I mean, it doesn't really make a difference, but other than it,
When they
there might
open
be
it
some
up,
digging, yeah, when they're doing the
Might be doing
digging.
some excavating.
Yeah,
I mean, it's already been decommissioned and everything, I'm sure, but,
I think they actually are gonna excavate for a basement, right? Isn't it?
I didn't see a basement in the plans, did you?
I don't think so.
Are they doing an elevator? Or
Yes,
Yeah, they are doing an elevator.
they don't need to drop down for,
you need a pit.
They have a little,
oh.
taller area in the top for
Yeah.
the elevator equipment. So,
so maybe it's
They do make elevators nowadays that don't need a pit though.
Okay.
So it just depends on the type of elevator and how
okay.
tall it is. I don't do a lot of commercial, but I did learn enough about elevators.
So other land use application to note is we got an application from the owners of the Larrabees who own the Conklin House property, requesting some text amendments to the tourist commercial zone. You may have heard about that, but the application is in, and word is out on the street, and we've already gotten some comments on it. So that would be something that will eventually go to the council for final review and approval after a planning commission.
so that's one we shouldn't be discussing.
Well, there's a distinction between, a quasi judicial
Mhm.
land use application where it's site specific. I mean, this is somewhat site specific, but as opposed to a legislative amendment, which is policy that applies generally citywide,
Okay,
the restrictions on discussions are not as stringent as they would be.
This is the text amendment, which is legislative. When there's a land use application, for that
Okay.
property, then you get into
So this is a type 3?
Type 4.
type 4. It's going
Well, it
straight
is
to
a type
council.
4.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to that point, it's obvious in some of the comments so far that the community doesn't understand that this is not a request for an RV park at this time. We're getting a lot of comments about an RV park, and people are already treating it like it is
Land use.
like it is a land use. So you might get some questions out in the community or people trying to approach you, and just want to make sure that you guys understand that this isn't an actual site plan review application. It could set the stage for an RV park in the future, but it's not at this time. We're still just talking about text amendments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's the tourist commercial zone, and this is the only piece of property that has that designation,
Correct.
correct?
Well, there's a couple.
Yeah, okay, excuse me.
The distillery is on tourist.
but it
commercial.
currently doesn't allow.
Currently does not allow RV parks.
So would the text amendment would change it in all the parcels that are zoned tourist commercial?
Correct, yes,
Not just this one?
correct.
So, and that text amendment would allow RV?
The way that the applicant's proposing it right now would allow RV parks.
Okay.
And there's several other modifications proposed as well, that would be changes
We'll
to
be
that.
hearing more.
Coming
Yeah.
to a meeting near you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very,
Since Gary's not here, I'll just give you an update on our Parks Board meeting. Last week, we brought forward to them the Parks STC rate increase, and also talked about the level of service ratio that we use in the community. That's that's a term that in parks, in the parks world, in terms of measuring the adequacy of your parks facilities in your community, is usually certain amount of acres per 1,000 people. Ours, if you'll remember through the Parks Master Plan, is kind of on the lower side of what a community like ours should be. It's around 2 acres per 1,000. Parks Master Plan recommended it go up to 5 acres per 1,000. So we wanted to bounce that off the Parks Board to see if they supported that, and they do. So that'd be something that I think council would eventually kind of make some kind of formal action on, that that's our new level of service. And it affects kind of, you know, how many acres of land we're going to need in the future. When you raise that ratio, the amount of acreage goes up. It also affects kind of how many of those acres and projects are STC eligible. So I won't go into a whole lot of details, because you guys are going to get a update here. It's coming up, I think, the next meeting. So, but we also talked with the Sisters Community Garden, made a presentation. They are looking for a site for their garden, because they're getting booted from the airport site, not this summer, but the next summer. And so they're trying to plan ahead. We discussed the Sun Ranch Park parcel. We're finding out that there's some limitations there because of the existence of the well, in terms of a setback. They have a 100-foot setback by statute. And so we're finding some concerns about having fertilizer and gardening, even though it's organic. It's kind of a concern of ours. And so it might necessitate them having to look at a different place, such as Cliff Clemens Park. So we're going to continue to work through the Parks Board and working with that group to find a suitable spot, because the Parks Master Plan does support a community garden in the community. So I'm going too long, right? Am I? You can start playing the music.
We just need the hook.
Your job's so cool, fascinating.
Any questions? Anybody have any
Yeah,
questions?
just a quick one. You probably answered this already, but I just want to make sure I understood. So on the affordable housing, you already said that you've got a couple of applicants, I think, for the grant program.
No formal applications yet, but people inquiring and asking questions about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, that's it.
That's it for staff comments.
All right,
Happy Valentine's Day.
thanks. Yeah, thanks, JD. The reason that came up is because I was emailing you today, and when I typed your name in, it showed your personal email address. It had the David, and so I thought I'd just razz you about it a little bit. It's not going to be a thing, Wheels.
Let's not tell the public.
No, that's okay. Yeah, sorry. How did your email? Okay. Who wants to go first?
I can go first.
Okay.
So I have a question for you, Mayor. On the LOC, this was the one from February 5th, updates on legislation stuff. And what I had a question about is they mentioned that there's the lobbying 101 toolkit that goes live next week. So that was February 5th. And so the toolkit's gone live. Is that something that you get and share with us? Because remember that one year we were going to, look at lobbying, my first year, we were looking at legislation and you needed to answer really quick and we really didn't have time to assess.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if this.
Yeah, it's even worse with the short session because they're already 1/5 or 1/4 through the session already. I mean, that's how short it is. And it's all housing mostly. It's like 90% housing. I get a lot of emails from LOC and I didn't see that. So I think that we're a member of LOC. Anybody can get
Request it.
Yeah, it's on their website
Yeah.
right now.
Okay.
But I don't think it's hard to find. If you want to take a look at it and let us know.
Yeah, I'll look it up.
And just send me a text or something. Let me say, hey, either say, hey, this is really cool.
Or.
Everybody should see. Well, yeah, I mean, I honestly don't see everything. I mean, and that's why I'm glad you brought it up.
Okay. So why am I wearing a medal? I'm wearing a medal because, the Habitat for Humanity, wanted to give me this award for donating quilts. For each house that the Habitat gives, they get a quilt. And so I've been doing this for, I can't remember how many years now, maybe 5 or 6 or something. Anyway, they gave me this award. So ta-da, I just wanted, I'm not going to have to be able to show this anywhere else. So this is where I'm showing it and thanking the Habitat for Humanity.
That's great. Your rear view mirror might need it though.
And then today, I mean, this is very, I'm getting a lot of attention lately. Today, I was at the FICA and the jazz choir came in and sang to Renee. Someone in the community wanted jazz choir to sing to Renee, which they did, the owner of FICA. And then, and I, applauded and I was all excited and they left. And then they came back and they sang to me. And the reason they sang to me is because I donate quilts for them to raise money for their jazz choir, for their music and their trips. And so I got honored for that. So, yay me, yay. I have it on right here. You could hear part of it.
Power of quilt.
Don't go changing or.
To try and
Yeah.
please me.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yep.
It was really cute.
Oh.
I have a video. It's just so cute.
Oh, good. That's nice.
Dang, and I could have been there maybe.
You could have.
I'm there sometimes, aren't I? So,
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
okay.
Yeah.
Jennifer?
Counselor Cobb and Counselor Blum and I and Carrie all attended the EDCO luncheon last week, which was very well attended. It was a very packed room. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Jordan, you were there as well.
180 people.
Yeah, so that was interesting, some interesting speakers. I mean, I will say that, the final speaker was a futurist and explaining that it's not just a name you get to make up for yourself, because I was excited about doing that for myself, but she works with organizations and, looking at using a lot of data to project into the future, what could happen, and then help those organizations plan or what could happen. And I was like, well, that's exactly what a council does and what a planning department does and what a city staff does. We're not so concerned about what's happening today or tomorrow, but in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I mean, that is our heavy lift. So we may all call ourselves futurists on your resumes if you'd like. I grant you that ability. And I also attended a EDCO pub talk at Worthy Brewing. I won't be able to make the one in February. It's always the last Thursday of the month or something like that. Those are always well attended and well put together and great speakers. And so if somebody wants to attend, you can
It's good networking.
purchase. Oh yeah.
Great networking.
Yeah,
too.
purchase a ticket through Carrie still, I guess.
We're in flux, almost.
Okay. Let's see what else we did. We had the vision implementation team meeting this morning. We hadn't had one since October. So as Carrie pointed out, I think it was a very productive meeting. We're getting kind of more congealed of what it's going to look like in this year and next year. And goal setting, I think we're going to have, there was kind of quarterly meetings before. I think we're going to up the number of meetings under the guise of having meetings that are going to be on specific topics. So, we can bring in some specialists and stuff so we can start getting more informed and drill down on certain goals that are in the VIT or ones that's been added.
I have a question about
Yeah.
that. Do some of the topics that you're considering overlay over multiple goals sometimes, or is it generally a topic and a goal just to kind of hit that one goal? Or do you not know yet?
Well, like on the special,
Yeah, when you
Meetings or
said you're
something.
gonna increase
Yeah.
meetings and have a topic, does that topic kind of overlay multiple goals, or is it kind of more goal specific? Just wondering, I don't.
but I think we were trying to be more goal specific, because
Okay.
we were thinking that as much as we would like to solve the 20 issues in there,
One at a time.
one at a time.
I got you.
One or
That's
two at
what
a
I
time.
was kind of going for.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think, a lot of good discussion in there on what, moving forward and, rebuilding the membership of that board. So, Yeah, that was positive. It was a good meeting. I think that's about it.
I had Public Works Advisory Committee last night, and Paul presented the Barkley bypass segment 1, which is being parceled now because of the cost. And also some changes to the McKinney Butte out by where the new school is going and up to that area. People were disappointed that Barkley was going to be, parceled into sections, and we're doing just such a small section. But the engineer that was on Zoom said, that they had gone through the whole thing and that the big trucks would be able to use it, even before we made some of the changes that would be coming in the later stages, and that the intersection that is what we're doing first is the Pope McKinney Barkley intersection is really what up to the post office is the section that we are doing first, and will be budgeted in July 1st, and that budget will be presented to us, and if approved, they hope to be able to do it later on this year. And I was surprised they're really, they had the schematics for the whole thing, and there really wasn't any big concerns about it. There was a few adjustments of, well, what if we move this over here and this over here because of the way pedestrians and bicycles go and whatnot. But everybody was pretty much in favor of it. And the McKinney Butte segment that will be coming to us, improvements. Everybody was thought that those were pretty good too. I think was it Kathy Russell, the gal that she came and testified, and she was very appreciative of how much attention that her comments were given, and she still had a few more. Then she says, I need you to go and stand right, where the traffic's coming in and out of Ray's and coming in and out of the burger joint and the dollar store, and, try and get across there in a wheelchair and do all those, and just look at that. It really needs some help. And Paul explained that there was going to be some signage and different things that were going to be involved there, and some of the problems that could come up to try and, because she was recommending a right turn in and a right turn out in certain spots, and how that might be problematic. But that's, it's definitely going to be helpful. But that little intersection right there, I find problematic myself on a number of occasions.
As a driver, not as a pedestrian, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the last thing I want to worry about is that there's pedestrians there as well. It's hard enough with just the cars. So I will be interested to see, how that sorts its way out. But it's coming forward to us with those recommendations that made there. We have a Charl meeting tomorrow. It's progressing. We'll see what's happening there. We had a COAC meeting. The next big funding cycle that we're going to be involved in is Connect Oregon, which is going to be trains, planes, everything but roads. So sometimes Sisters Airport puts in stuff. I know the Redmond Airport has already got a proposal, so that's the next thing we will be looking at, evaluating and giving our opinion on which is the most important and whatnot. So we'll be doing that soon. And that's it.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. I was asked by Carrie to talk about if there's a counselor that's interested in getting into the Civility Leadership Academy. Is that what it's called? Did I get it? Civic.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wrote it down wrong. Civic Leadership Civility. That's close enough. Is there anybody that's interested in doing that? Have you?
When is it?
That's a good question.
So sometime March 11th through 13th, we don't know exactly when yet.
And that's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Correct, yeah.
And obviously not this week, the week that we have stuff.
Do we have a meeting that week? Oh, sorry, my
I
head
think
just
we
went
do.
blank. I think we do have it on Wednesday that week.
Yeah.
Yeah, 13th, yeah.
So that makes it hard for us to attend then, right?
Well, if it's just Wednesday night, it's not going to be Wednesday
It's
night.
not through, yeah, it's just we haven't decided on which date yet.
Oh, okay.
There will be a time during like an hour or two during one
Well,
of those
if,
3
if
days.
no one else is interested, I'm interested. Is anybody else interested? No.
I
Okay.
mean,
Oh, I am, but I don't
Oh.
know how useful I will be yet. So I could be a backup.
Okay.
Oh, do you
There
need
you
more,
go.
do you need more than one?
No, just one.
Yeah, I could do it Monday afternoon. That's the only time I have
Well,
available
I
that
mean,
week.
I don't want to jump in where you were hoping to go,
No.
Jennifer. So,
She's looking.
No, I mean, I'm open, but no, I think it would be better to be the first choice and then
okay,
if it doesn't work
Yeah.
out, I can probably.
okay. Is that okay?
And I don't mind being a backup too, just in case they both can't make it. I don't mind. I usually find time if I have to. Okay, so we're good there. I wanted to talk about, Cocoa meeting I had on Monday. There's a couple interesting things that happened there. City Manager Wheeler was there. That was your first live one or no, second one?
Yeah.
Second one. That was, a pretty big meeting. We had a, discussion about our water subconsultant. As you've heard me talk about over the last 6 months or so, there's been a lot of water rulemaking processes and other discussions about water in Central Oregon by OWRD, which is Oregon Water Resources Department. Our water subconsultant had a $40,000 budget for this fiscal year for Cocoa, which is actually done through the city of Prineville, but they're paid for by all the member cities. He basically ran out of money in the first 6 months, near the end of December because of all the work, subconsultant work he was doing, and it was a lot. GSI. Great great consultants. They didn't do anything wrong. We were aware that this was probably gonna happen pretty early in the year once the rulemaking became so crazy. And so we had to financially rectify the situation by voting about raising, getting more money so they can do work for the rest of the year because the work's not done. Just the budget was done. So they brought up a proposal for $30,000 more funds before the Cocoa full committee, and we voted on it to unanimously to increase that because it's just work that needs to be done. It's been going on for 5 or 6 years, but this year was just especially more busy. I voted as well to increase that. Everyone should know that the cities pay on a population per capita basis, and our percentage of everything that goes through Cocoa is 3%. So a $30,000 increase for Cocoa is paid, our portion is $900. And I would tell you that they've already done for us tens of thousands of dollars of benefit in the first part of the year. And I think that the work that they do, just making sure that this is the Central Oregon Cities Organization, they represent the cities to make sure that we basically don't get run over by the state. We do also, don't just fight for the cities though, we do cooperate and collaborate with the other water users in Central Oregon so they don't get run over by the state. And so if we didn't do that, we wouldn't get much support from the rest of the Central Oregon area because we only use 4% of the water, the cities do. Irrigation and farmlands use much more water, obviously 96% if you do the math. So it was important to do, it was done, and so our portion is $900. I think it's totally worth it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The second little tidbit, I don't know if you remember this tidbit, was the ODOT tidbit of their budget for the next STIP period.
Not much.
What did they say, 29 million or something?
No, it was a little more.
92
but Yeah, it was like 80 or 90 million.
I think it was, okay, I had 29 in my head. It's 92 million for the whole state. Now, you think about what's going on in Bend. That's a multi-$100 million project that they, so that's basically It's basically zero.
Why is it so low?
Well, we know that ODOT's having issues with funding and their resources, and
Oh,
So-
That's their whole budget, or that's just their
For the whole state,
operational budget?
that's
versus
the money
dedicated
for new
dollars
roads.
For federal roads,
That's just,
federal dollars.
yeah, that's what they have right now. Now, I just want to say that thank God we got all our ducks in a row on the roundabout and got it through, because it wouldn't
Yeah.
happen next time.
Yeah.
Even if we had it all on the board,
Yeah.
ready to go. It
It'd
wouldn't
be
have
another 5, 10 years.
So
for
we-
sure. And same
big
thing
shout
with
out
them,
to
that-
Paul,
Yeah, big shout.
all roundabout.
former city manager who really said,
Course.
let's just go do this, even though we knew we might, there was a time when we talked about having to come up with the whole thing. And that might have happened if we didn't get it done quicker, right? So anyway, I just wanted to let people know that ODOT's in trouble, and that's not gonna get any better until they figure it out. There's a lot of talk in the Portland area about tolls and, all kinds of things. And I think one person, and I don't remember who it was, said there's 9 ways to fund, statewide transportation, and ODOT currently only does like 2 of them. And they're gonna have to figure out a way to pay for the rest. And until that happens, they're gonna.
Isn't it mostly because of the reduction in fossil fuel cars or vehicles, or?
That's a really small part of it.
Well, I mean, actually,
it's-
gas
it's
taxes
gonna get
are actually
bigger.
still doing okay. It's, the cost for construction and of course.
Oh, it's
personnel and
going up so
everything
Yeah.
Has really escalated, and revenues haven't kept.
And there is talk about how do you recoup losses from electric vehicles, and I think
Yeah.
that will eventually be part of the conversation. Luckily, we don't have to, we're not part of that conversation for the most part,
Yeah.
but we do have to monitor it and just make sure we know kind of where ODOT's going, so we can throw our spin on it or react to it how we have to. I mean,
We already
It's-
have a toll gate here.
yeah, we have a toll gate, we don't have gates. So, but anyway, I just wanted to, it was really kind of an eye-opening situation, and everybody at the table, and Coco was like, oh boy. So, it just means that projects are gonna get harder to do for the next, I don't know, 5 or 10 years probably. Things might slow down a little bit.
But I have a question for you and you, because in regards to that, because I don't remember, the bid for the roundabout came in lower.
Yeah.
Is that a sign that costs are coming down, or was that
Oh,
something else?
Yeah, I think.
Is it not so dire?
well,
Yeah, costs don't come down, but they don't escalate as much, right, in the construction world. So I think we are seeing, one, the combination of a favorable like timing and bidding, right? And, we're also just coming off of what just happened down the highway, right? And I think we're kind of,
Piggyback.
yeah, the wins from that, we're benefiting from that. But yes, I think we're seeing some moderating, in terms of the price increases in construction, and that's been happening for the last.
I wish Paul was here because he could really speak to it a lot better, but he would be able to tell you what the last 3-year period of ODOT was, probably off the top of his head. And I would say that this number that we just heard from ODOT is probably low percentage point. It could be 10% of what they normally do or used to do. So, but basically, I was hearing from other people, other cities, that have been doing this a long time. They basically said that's no money. I mean, that'll go so fast that there won't be anything left for most people. So I just wanted to throw that out there because, again, I'm not trying to throw this dire picture on future highway issues, but I thought it highlighted how, we worked hard to make sure we got it done as fast as possible. And we kind of started the official process in 2018, that time frame. And it's getting built in 2024 when ODOT always says it's 8 to 10 years, and we're gonna get it done in 6.
Yeah.
And
Pretty
and
quick.
that's, huge staff kudos is basically it. So anyway, that's really all I have, and see you next time unless anybody's got anything else. Bye-bye.